This is weird. The practice rooms are more empty than I've ever seen them at this time of day. Kind of surprised that it's even open. Oh, someone's here. Actually, no one's there. Must have just triggered the light. I can tell that no one's used this room. I've been here in the past few days and everything stays exactly as I left it in terms of where I put the bench and everything. Very important. Thanks to all you guys who have been watching my vlogs so far. I really appreciate the comments and just letting me know in general how I'm doing. I'm trying something out entirely new for this new vlog here. I'm actually learning a piece from scratch. I've had several questions about how I learn or how to best practice certain sections. So I thought it might be a good idea to just document the process of how I personally learn a new piece. So I'm here practicing during the coronavirus epidemic, making sure to disinfect this piano as best as I can. And today I'm going to be learning a new piece. This is the Piano Sonata No. 2, subtitled The Fire Sermon by Einojuhani Rautavaara, who's not a very well-known composer. His works are rarely performed from the concert stage, but I first became aware of Rautavaara upon hearing his piece Cantus Arcticus, which is subtitled A Concerto for Birds and Orchestra. I definitely wanted to play this piece, though, because the performance I saw on YouTube was one of the ones that had the sheet music scrolling as the piece progresses, and I could already imagine in my head some of the things that I wanted to do with it, as far as phrasing, voicing, timing, etc. As you can see, it's brand new. I have not really done any markings. I haven't even tried to read through it, so I'm just going to be starting totally from scratch. I've listened to it several times, so I understand a little bit about the rhythms, but I'm just going to kind of try to break down this process for you. The very first thing that you notice is in odd time signature 8/8, and these groupings 3/2/3/3/2/3. That's pretty much the prevailing rhythm throughout it. Definitely always want to have a pencil when you're practicing, unless you use an iPad. Alright, so the left hand I can see already fits into a group. So, yeah. So, just in the first few seconds of playing it, what I notice is the left hand is all white keys, the right hand is all black keys. Kind of a simple observation, but that can help inform what fingerings I'll be using. So I just really quickly went through and decided what fingers I'm going to use. These I may or may not change depending on how it goes over time, but as I mentioned in some of my other videos, it's really important to establish things like fingering early on. In writing it out, I also realized what's going on with this rhythm. So the right hand is playing the same thing every measure. The left hand switches off every measure. So now it starts with A, then it starts with G, then it starts with A, then it starts with G. So it's really a 2-measure rhythmic pattern. Then when you get to the second line, you start to see little changes, introducing one note at a time, like there's B, then there's F. So it's just it's a pattern that's beginning to expand outwards more and more. You can see the first major change comes in measure 9, where the pattern starts to shift. Well, actually, the right hand is all white notes now, and the left hand is more chromatic. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but even before going through the piece, or starting on the first page, it's a good idea to have an understanding of what comes next. So there's the rhythmic section, and then you have your first real melodic content, cantabile, that means in a singing style, here in the right hand. And the theme is used throughout, and it sounds like... I really like this melody. It's very modal, meaning it's not from a tonal scale, it's from a different type of scale. Lots of parallel motion. From there, it begins to return to the percussive element, and you have your first real scale passages at measure 78. I guess you could say that this whole movement is a little bit like an etude. It's got a lot of rhythms, it's got a lot of arpeggios and scales, and then it just has huge chords at the end. It's a little interesting. He wants you to hold all these chords with the pedal, and it says, "Hands off!" exclamation point.
Whoa, no touchy!
I've never quite seen that before. "Lift the pedal gradually!" exclamation point. So I don't know if he wants you to take the hands off like really fast or just gradually. The exclamation point makes me think that it should be done really quickly.
No touch.
I've also never seen this in my life before. Unicorda I've seen many times, but duecorda I've never seen. What that means is to use the left pedal here, and when I push it, it'll move the keyboard over a little bit, if you can see that. So what the left pedal does is it'll move these hammers over just a little bit. Above this note, every key that you hit will actually strike 3 strings, hence the term trecorda, and the unicorda is supposed to move these hammers over so it only hits one of them. And duecorda would be somewhere in the middle, I suppose, so it's hitting 2 of the strings, not 1, not 3. Now, by playing with the unicorda pedal and changing the distance ever so slightly, you can get these slight gradations of tonal color because you're playing on a part of the velvet or felt that isn't always used to hitting the string, so it'll give you a slightly softer timbre. And I think a lot of pianists actually know this. They play with the unicorda pedal at varying degrees of depth, but this is the first time I've actually seen it marked in a score. So I just played through this a couple times, and I already decided to make a finger change here. I had 3-5. I decided to change to 1-3 because of what comes next. So that just is an example of how quickly I can change, but you know, I still don't regret writing the other thing because now it made me realize what was wrong with it, and now I have a plan in my mind about how to jump from here to there. To show you what I'm talking about, this is what I previously had. And what I didn't like is the switch from here. It's easier because then I'm already here for this chord. So now that I put those fingerings in place, I'll come back over the next several days, try them out, and see whether or not they work. And all the while I'm doing this, I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping the bigger picture in mind. So it starts with this kind of rumbly rhythm, and it has these cluster chords. Very atonal, very dissonant, very rhythmic. But that only lasts for a little while, and then in the midst of it you have this. And since this first movement is so brief, I really want to accentuate the difference between the atonal rhythmic and the modal melodic, and make those as opposed as possible. I think that's the most effective way to show where you are in the piece. Because when you have something atonal, and then you have this, it really makes it feel like you've come home and you have an arrival point once you hit those chords that are more familiar to the ear. So you can kind of gauge where I stopped working by where I stopped writing in some of the penciled numbers. So I worked this page up to here. I can already see, I can look ahead and realize that it's more of the same rhythm and structure, but different fingerings and different chords. So this is enough for my brain to process here. I'm going to jump to this section because it's a totally different sound, and it just helps keep my practice time a little fresher. So maybe I'll just try to sight read through this section. bit confusing because there's 3 different voices going on. And what's confusing is the stuff in the middle because of the rhythms. So if I play it without that, what's not simple is because unfortunately I have only 2 hands, I need to cover the distance between here and here by jumping around and relying on pedal. And that goes pretty much for the entire segment here. So again, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it left hand, then right hand, and write in some fingerings. So I played through the left hand just a couple times, and I realized there's a pattern inside here. And this is why you slow things down, break the hands apart, because you can't really understand what's happening until you break it down. Here's what's happening. There's this what we call ostinato pattern, or repeated monotonous pattern happening while these octaves and fifths are moving around. And because it's an ostinato, that means I can more than likely use the same fingerings each time for this. So since I know I can use the same fingerings each time, I don't have to think about it as hard. So I'm going to try to make this always 2, this 1, and this 2. In the right hand, the same kind of thing is happening with an ostinato. What's a little more tricky is that you need to hang on and keep the melody line, which is in the top voice, moving and have a shape, not get lost in everything that's happening here so that you lose the shape. When I practice this, a lot of times I'll practice with 2 hands, so it's supposed to be played in one, but I'll play. So I'm trying to create just a very simple arc form for that melody. I may change that shape, but for now I'll keep it. And I noticed that this is the weird part. That's where you have this that wants to be held, the B flat wants to be held, but it's immediately repeated by the rhythmic pattern. So the only way to fix that is with pedal. Also don't like to use a repeated finger on it, especially when one of them is supposed to be heavy. The first one's supposed to have full sound, the second one should be lighter. So probably 3-2. I think that works. I want very, very different levels between the melody and this stuff. This is really more of a whisper. It's more of movement. One thing I always try to do, no matter what I'm learning, is have, I don't know how to describe it, I guess I'd call it multi-dimensional thinking. So there's thinking in the unit of these tiny notes and within the rhythms, and then there's thinking of the whole notes carrying over to one another, and then there's thinking of the larger section and then the section within the section. So you kind of pull back. I don't want to get so caught up right now with these little details that I don't think about the shape. And this is where I'm already starting to think about musical decisions. There's absolutely no dynamics written from measure 52 all the way until measure 70. And of course, you don't want to play everything monotone. You're gonna have to do something. So I'm trying to figure out where the phrase is headed, and it could be done a couple different ways. That's an arch. Or I could try to continue the crescendo, and I'm wondering if I want to do that because it would sound like this. I'll be making more of those decisions over the coming days as this becomes more familiar in my hands, but I already want to be thinking about that, so that in my subconscious, at least, I'm beginning to think about how I want to go through the piece, what I want to bring out, what's the high points, what's the low points. Now I'm beginning to look at this. There are obviously scales, and I'm obviously going to need to come up with a fingering for these scales. So I need to play through them and kind of figure out what's going on in here. All right, so the scale that's written is... I think it's octatonic. So the octatonic scale is half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. Let me see. Half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole. Yes. So now that I know that, it's already easier to figure out what I'm going to do. And thankfully, it's not a long pattern. It manages to repeat fairly quickly. Repeat. 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 And then here's something new. There's a big debate when it comes to fingering among pianists. A lot of people will say you should always avoid, as often as possible, playing a black key with your thumb. I don't know. I think it depends on context for me, because I tried this a couple different ways. That's option 1. But option 2 is this. So I would be starting with my thumb, and the reason I like option 2, at least right now, it's less moving around, less switching of hand positions. And I think it helps me create more of a even crescendo and decrescendo. Now this part up at the top, I could use the same logic that I used and do this, which would be a little awkward using my pinky. It would maintain one hand position. The only reason I don't like it is it's marked triple forte. So I think to get more sound, probably less strain than doing this. Yeah, I can't really get the right sound out of the pinky. I don't want to hurt myself, so... So that's the fingering that I decided to write down for now. I'll keep playing it over the coming days and see if it stands up to the test of time. It's been about an hour working on this piece so far. I'm getting a little bit mentally tired, so I'm probably going to shut it down there on this piece for today. But you can see I've already covered several major sections, or at least looked at them. So I have the fingering in place for this passage. I'm going to write this one in. I forgot to write that one in. I'll do that in a second. I've have the melodic section. I've at least looked at it. And the opening rhythmic section. So when I come back next time, I'm going to take a look at these once more, but I know that I need to hit this spot because this is sort of new material. Same rhythm pattern, but it looks to me like we're in a new tonal or modal center. And this is also completely new. I haven't looked at the left-hand arpeggios, new time signature, repeat of opening material. That looks to me, yeah, it's recapping, and then it comes to the end right here. Very short opening movement. But before I stop practicing, I'm just going to go through one last time, hit those sections, play through them a couple times. I won't write in anything new, and I won't look at any new stuff. I'm just trying to reinforce what I already did so that when I come back tomorrow, it's fresh right off the bat, and I can just head it towards my long-term memory.